So now that we have your file set up in Illustrator with all your layers and all the words that you want to animate, it's time to bring it into your animation program. And in this video, we're going to show you how to do that in Adobe Animate. If you have not already set up your file, if you for some reason got to this tutorial without seeing the other ones, go look at the other tutorials 1, 2, and 3 in this video series so you can see how you get this set up. You can also download the files that are provided and bring them in. So if you kind of want to skip the design stage, you can jump right into the animation. But let's get to it, shall we? So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a file that we can animate on. Now, so I'm just going to click on Create New or File New. Now the files that we set up in Illustrator were 720p, so they were 1280 by 720 pixels. So under the character animation, even though we're not animating characters, I can choose the HD 1280 by 720 feature, or I can just type in the details on the side here, 1280 720 for our pixels width and height, 24 frames per second, and our platform type is going to be ActionScript 3.0. So with that done, our file set up, or our framework set up, we can go ahead and click Create File. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring all of the assets that we created from Illustrator into here along with our audio file. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to bring in my individual artboards. So I'm going to click on File, Import, and I'm going to click Import to Stage. Now what that's going to do is it's going to bring it right into my program. I'm going to click on artboard number 1. Let's start there. I'm going to click Open. It's going to say it looks like this is part of a series. Because we had artboards 1, 2, 3, 4, it says, hey, it looks like you've numbered these. Is this part of a sequence that you want to bring in all together? And I'm going to put no, because I want to deal with them one file at a time. Now just really quickly, it shows you here on each layer and what is part of each layer. And I'm just going to collapse all of these. Alright, so you can look at just the individual layers. So we have I know who I am, and there are all the layers. So I want to select all the layers. If there's anything here like, well, how did that get in there? You can always just uncheck it. And it's going to ask how you want to import them. So I'm going to import these as individual Animate layers. You can see you can bring them in and squish them all into one layer, or make it keyframes. So each layer is actually a different frame. So you actually create your animation in Illustrator. So I'm going to choose Animate Layers so that the layers in Illustrator remain layers in Animate. Now before I go, and I'm going to also choose Place Objects at Original Position, meaning I've already laid them out properly in Illustrator. Keep those positions for me. Now the last thing I'm going to do is when you animate in Adobe Animate, you have to make, if something's going to move, you want it to be a symbol, and normally it's a movie clip or a graphic. So instead of bringing everything in and then converting it after, I'm going to do it all in one shot. So what I'm going to do is select all my layers, and I'm going to say create a movie clip right off the bat. So you can see here, this one here is going to make a movie clip, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So it's going to make movie clips for all of them. Now when I click Import, it's going to import them all. Okay, you'll notice that each layer in Illustrator, from Illustrator, got a layer in Animate. And when I go to my library, you're going to see that there is my artboard right there. There's a folder, and each layer has actually been converted to a symbol. Now we could have renamed them when we imported them, but I just left it as the default because I already named them in Illustrator, and it gave it, each one of these gets the name, the layer name, which is awesome. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit messy here in the library, but we're really not going to be coming back to the library, so I'm not 100% concerned about that. Now that I've got all my layers selected here, imported, what I want to do is I'm going to group them. This will allow me to animate everything all together and also make it a little bit more organized, because if I bring in every single thing I want to animate from Illustrator, I'm going to have so many layers that I have to worry about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder which allows me to give it a name, and I'm going to call it Part 1. So this is the first thing I want to animate. Oh, and I keep forgetting that. You can't have spaces. So it's Part 1 without a space. And I'm going to drag it all the way to the top. I'm then going to select all of my layers, and drag it to be part of that folder. So now when I collapse the folder, you're going to notice that all those layers are associated with that folder. So if I press the eyeball for that folder, they all turn off or they all turn on. If I decided to put a keyframe and move everything at the same time, they'll all move together as opposed to having to move each item individually. Now I want ready to bring in my other artboard. So I'm going to bring in everything all at once. In order to do that, I find this a lot easier. Create a new layer first. I do not want to import the new artboard into this folder. I want it to go to a different one. So the very first thing I did was I created a new layer. I'm now going to go back and do File, Import, Import to Stage once again. I'm going to choose my second artboard, click Open. It appears it's part of a sequence of images. No, I don't want to do that. I am going to select everything here, so everything in here, and if I collapse it, yeah, you might have to collapse them individually if you really want the visual there. But I'm going to select all my layers again because I want them all to be a movie clip again. Again, you could go through and name them individually. I'm going to let the layer name take precedence here, and I'm going to make sure Place Objects at Original Position and Animate Layers. The other thing I forgot to mention, you may want to look at your registration point. So do you want everything to move based on the top left? Do you want it to move based on the center? Whatever the case may be, I'm just going to leave it at the top left for now. And I'm going to click Import. You'll notice there are the layers. The layers that I made actually got overwritten. And don't worry about this right now. Like, why does that look so silly? Because remember, part 1 is still visible. I'm going to do the same thing where I create a folder. I'll call it part 2. And I'm going to put all of my layers in there as well. So I'll take all those layers, drag it into part 2. So now I've got my artboard for part 2, and I've got my artboard for part 1. I'm going to pause the video here. I'm going to bring in my other artboards. You can do the same thing, and then when you're ready, you can unpause the video and you can watch how we're going to bring in the audio. Okay, if you're at this part now, you have each of your artboards inside a different folder. So here I've got part 1 will be the I Know Who I Am, part 2 will be the I'm the Dude, part 3 is playing the dude, disguised as another dude. So they're each separated, which is awesome. Now that I've got that done, it's time to bring in our audio. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this really quickly. I call this Tropic Thunder Setup. All right, now that it's saved, because it's really dangerous to have an untitled document. Now that it's saved, I'm going to bring in the audio. So I'm going to create a new file. Now, personally, I like having the audio at the bottom. Okay, you can have it at the top if you like. And I'm just going to name this audio. So we're going to place the audio on this actual layer. With the first frame selected, now it's really important, if you don't want the audio to start right away, you may want to create a keyframe later. So create a blank keyframe on frame, like let's say 14, and then import it there so it starts on frame 14. You can always move it later, but I'm going to import it right now. So I'm going to choose frame 1 of the audio layer, choose File, Import. I'm going to bring it right to the stage. You could bring it into the library for later and import it when you want, but I'm just going to bring it right to the stage. Bring the audio file from our downloaded files, and I'll click Open, and there it is. When I click the frame, you'll notice that there is a sound option right there as well. So at any point, you could click on a keyframe, and from the drop down, have the sound start there. So right now, I know that dude.wave will play as of frame 1. I could always grab frame 1 and move it if I wanted to start sooner or later, depending on where you have it. So I'm just going to move that back to frame 1. There we go. Okay. So now that it's there, here's one of the things that you want to do. You'll notice that you can't see all the audio wavelengths. I'm going to move down the line and press F5 on the audio layer to start seeing all the wavelength. So I know when the sound starts, when he's most likely saying something, and when he stops. And you can see right there, stops talking about the frame 135, 137 mark. That's where this is going to end. So now I can see the whole wavelength. I know when all the audio happens. I've got my time frame, and I'm pretty much ready to animate. The last thing you want to do in your setup is be able to hear the audio. So right now, And this is probably how you have it set up if it's on event. So if I look at, by clicking on the frame and going into the properties, there's a sync feature that says event. And when you scrub, which means grab the playhead and go back and forth, you'll notice you can't hear anything. Well, that's because it's just set to play. There's no timing involved. It's just going to play the audio like background music. It really doesn't matter when it happens. So I want to be able to hear it, because how am I supposed to know when words are supposed to pop up? By clicking on the frame and choosing sync stream instead of event, now you're saying I want that sound to play at that time. So when I scrub, you can actually hear what he says when he says it, and it'll make our timing so much easier going forward. So with that, we're going to save it, and you're ready to go to the next lesson, which will show you how to actually animate your kinetic typography.